filed by the state of Texas and their attorney general. The state of Texas versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the state of Georgia, the state of Michigan, and the state of Wisconsin. This lawsuit, again, at the filing at the U.S. Supreme Court.
This is the most significant of the cases filed, and it's the most significant because it is, as Jordan just said, completely outcome determinative. What does that mean? It means that if the court were to rule in favor of Texas, those four states, the states named in the complaint, would in fact have their state legislatures determine the outcome. They would pick the electors.
This case now invokes the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, which means states can sue states for violations of law or claims that they have in the Supreme Court of the United States. The Supreme Court does not have to accept the case. It's discretionary.
In all of these states, we have elections that are at variance with their own statutory rules. That's number one. But number two, in Pennsylvania in particular, the Secretary of State made an affirmative representation to the United States Supreme Court suggesting that ballots would be segregated that were challenged. She failed to comply.
This comes on the day that electors are being seated. And then next week on the 14th, they will vote. So this all has to happen very quickly. But this is extremely significant because the state, Texas, has the jurisdiction to go right to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's part of the original jurisdiction of Article 3 of the U.S. in the Constitution against filing against these states.
What this is saying is you violated equal protection of the law in the way you conducted, you states who are defendants, in the way you conducted your elections. You diluted the electoral votes of the Texas people, and you therefore violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution.
The court in Bush versus Gore had argument on the briefs were finished up around the 10th or 11th. Argument was done on the 12th. Decision came out on the 13th or thereby, maybe a day off. And then the electors met. This, if accepted, and they have jurisdiction, I mean, it's original jurisdiction. What original jurisdiction means is that it's not a situation where I file a petition for writ of certiorari because I've gone from the district court to the Court of Appeals to the Supreme Court. The case from Texas, different from Mike Kelly's case, went directly to the Supreme Court of the United States and lays out very clearly all of the legal issues that have to be addressed.
What's important to point out here is that one of the options is that if the Electoral College votes aren't redistributed through new electors by state legislatures, Congress gets involved. And even though the House is controlled by Democrats, they don't control state delegations.
This is even a greater majority, so to speak, than it was last Congress. Last Congress, Republicans only controlled 26 delegations, and there was one tie. Jordan, now they're going to control 27, and two of them are going to be tied. So essentially, that's a 27 to 21 delegation advantage. If it goes to Congress, President Trump would certainly have the advantage.
As John Adams says, and as is quoted by Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, that form of government which is best contrived to secure an impartial and exact execution of the law is the best of republics. In other words, follow the law in your state.
Unlike the situation where Justice Alito was the circuit justice for the Third Circuit, which included Pennsylvania, and could issue the initial administrative stay, which he did in our case and he did in this Congressman Kelly's case, and then it refers to the court. This is a bill of complaint. You would have to have 5 justices agree to accept the bill. Now, could Chief Justice Roberts issue an administrative order pending this? Of course, he's the Chief Justice of the not just the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He is the Chief Justice of the United States. So yes, he could issue an order, but it wouldn't be the determination as to who is going to take the case rests with the 9 justices.
This is a critical suit, folks. This is an important piece of litigation. Forget all the other suits, that have been filed in other jurisdictions for the moment. This is now before the Supreme Court of the United States. This court will determine one way or another what's going to happen in this election.
I think it's important for you to understand this single case is outcome determinative.
It is outcome determinative. This is the one. We said there was going to be one. You're looking at it.
You've got this new Supreme Court case filed by the state of Texas against the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the state of Georgia, the state of Michigan, and the state of Wisconsin, filed by the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton. And in this, really, it's three major issues. One is that the electors clause has been violated because the state legislatures didn't make these rule changes the way they are supposed to under the Constitution. You've got due process claims, equal protections claims. But we have a good question that came in. So they said, American Patriot on the YouTube Super Chat said, so what happens when one state refuses the election's electoral votes? Now, Texas is getting out ahead of that, Dad.
That's exactly why this is filed.
Listen, it's not that we're rejecting your electoral votes. It's that you should be going about placing your electors, selecting your electors a different way because your elections were too tainted.
Yeah, so let me read right from the actual complaint. So when you start these cases with original jurisdiction, so it's at the Supreme Court. It's not going to the lower courts. It's at the Supreme Court. Excuse me. Lawful elections are at the heart of our constitutional democracy. The public and indeed the candidates themselves have a compelling interest in ensuring that the selection of a president, any president, is legitimate. If that trust is lost, the American experiment will founder. A dark cloud hangs over the 2020 presidential election. Our country stands at an important crossroads. Either the Constitution matters and must be followed. I'm going to read that again. Either the Constitution matters and must be followed, even when some officials consider it inconvenient or out of date, or it is simply a piece of parchment on the display at the National Archives. We ask the court to choose the former. So here's what you have. You have a preemptive, in a sense, I think, Jordan, it's a very accurate way of saying it, of getting ahead of what is a mess, because you've got litigation going on in these 4 states right now. Now, the order would probably be for additional briefing if they were interested in the case.
I would think so, yes. The Supreme Court.
Electors have been seated.
Well, they were supposed to have been seated at noon Eastern time today, December 8th. Yeah.
But they don't vote until the 14th.
That's correct.
So the safe harbor is in what they call the safe harbor. How significant do you see this?
This is very significant because the litigation that has been filed by Texas against Pennsylvania and these other jurisdictions is an extremely important case because what it says is this. Remember, it's being brought on behalf of the citizens of Texas against the citizens of other jurisdictions of other states. And it's saying the way you went about choosing your electors violated the Constitution of the United States in that you did not allow your legislatures to have their laws followed in the implementation of the election and the selection of those people who are the electors who elect the President of the United States. Remember, in the United States, we don't have a popular vote of the President. We vote for electors who in turn vote for the President on December 14th. It'll be this year. And what this is saying is you violated equal protection of the law in the way you conducted, you states who are defendants, in the way you conducted your elections. You diluted the electoral votes of the Texas people, and you therefore violated the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. This is a critical case. I want to say something really. I applaud Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, who had the incredible courage of his conviction to find the way to challenge these other states who didn't do it, who wouldn't do it the right way, who would not convene their legislatures. But Ken Paxton is a stand-up guy. He did the right thing. He's going to take a lot of flack for it, I'm sure, but he did the right thing, Jay, in what he did in filing this lawsuit.
Look, Ken Paxton is a patriot, and you're right. He'll get flack because that's the way the media is. But he did the right thing. I think he has a quote from John Adams, Harry, I thought was very interesting in the beginning of the brief. It says, that form of government which is best contrived to secure an impartial and exact execution of the law is the best of republics. And that's really what you're talking about here. This election has been a mess.
Less than a week away from when the Electoral College is supposed to ultimately choose its electors, and there is so much about this election that is still up in the air. At least 5 states have major constitutional issues with the election, including how the election was run, whether or not the state legislature's rules were followed, whether or not ballots were incorrectly cast, and whether or not there's been signature verifications of these millions of ballots that suddenly came in the middle of the night. To say this election was a complete mess would be an understatement. Plus, a new lawsuit filed today by the state of Texas is asking the Supreme Court to rule that the election in 4 battleground states is unconstitutional because of their unwillingness to follow the law. And that lawsuit goes on to state in a yet-to-be publicly disclosed affidavit that the plaintiffs claim that Biden's chance of winning, given Trump's lead the night of the election, is, quote, less than 1 in a quadrillion. And is there a path forward for President Trump to still be able to pull this out? I'm Ben Swan. All of it today on Truth in Media.